Hi there, my name's Ed, and this is a video about Stray. Stray is a game where you play as a stray cat and stray from your stray cat friends to stray into an underground city where you stray from the law to mount a voyage of discovery. But what does Stray tell us about real life cities? Welcome to this video essay on Stray and the animal rights to the city.
Oh, well, of course you must have lots of demands!
So let's start with a brief rundown of Stray's story. The game was dreamt up by two ex-Ubisoft employees, Cola Scula and Vivian Mermet Guyenet, who went independent to develop a game cryptically entitled HK Project. The game entered development in 2015. Then Colas and Vivian spent 5 years looking at cat pics before announcing in 2020 that Stray was coming to all platforms, including Platform 1 for the hype train. With anticipation high and catnipiation even higher, the game's release marked the very first opportunity to play in a virtual environment as something approximating a real-life cat. This isn't a cat. This is definitely not a cat. Yeah, that's a cat. The game begins in a cyberpunk valley reclaimed by nature. I think they call this solarpunk, where Stray sets off with chums to go exact some serious mice bants or whatever post-human cats get up to. Anyway, Stray falls down a big hole, and that's where the cyberpunk reclaims the solarpunk and the cityscapes of the game start to emerge. Now, if that sounds right up your funk street, now's your chance to play Stray before I wholeheartedly spoil it in order to make a superficial argument about human geography. But please do stay and watch the rest of the video because I've actually got the algorithm in the kitchen and he's quite angry. So, Stray lands in an underground city, all tight alleyways and teetering apartment blocks. A city that's been colonised by extremely humanised robots who, it transpires, okay, seriously big spoilers now, are carrying the encoded consciousness of long extinct humanity. A facsimile society, living on underground in the belief that the world above is dangerous and uninhabitable. But throughout Stray, our tetchy titular protagonist indirectly encourages the robot-human robots to recognise that it is disease, social stratification, and the police state that blocks them from the outside world, not the outside world itself. That they have been well and truly cyberpunked. In terms of gameplay, it's mostly platforming through this detailed world in a way that doesn't stray too far from the baseline of Assassin's Creed or Uncharted, but with a cat instead of Nolan North. The overarching systems of the game are nothing to write home about, but the moment-to-moment control of a non-human character is really innovative. As John Bales wrote for PC Gamer, Stray comprises a slick, satisfying loop of pause, look, leap that sustains the feline illusion, where indulging your sense of kitty mischief and inquisitiveness becomes especially enticing. Wheelie bins and aircon units offer quick vertical ascension, and once you're up on the roof, can you resist pouring a paint can off a ledge? Ignoring the wonderful phrasing of pouring a paint can for just a sec, I want to pull out what John's highlighting here. The controls of Stray, in basically their first, most focused iteration, are so perfectly aligned to the systems and structures of its world, and equally well aligned to the broader world-building aspect of Stray. This city is just right for a cat to navigate in a practical sense, and it's also the perfect environment for a cat in a holistic sense. Stray is welcome to poodle around, and while not every robot welcomes the intrusion of a Mardy Moggy, none of them are downright antagonistic, and most of them are pretty fond. So what does that tell us about Stray's world compared to the world that we and our furry friends actually live in? Well, to answer that question, we'll need to jump into the world of urban theory once again. Now, if you watched my last video on city skylines, you'll remember Henri Lefebvre. One of Lefebvre's ideas was the right to the city, what he calls a cry and demand. A right to urban life, characterised by a world of possibilities that tests the bounds of what we call utopian, and stresses the need for a reform of urban space as we experience it, in the name of asserting urban rights. Like, think about all the rights the contemporary city deprives you of on a daily basis. The right to loiter, the right to enter, the right to peaceful protest. The right to the city is about asserting those rights and generating an oppositional place-bound politics against, sorry, capitalism. Since Lefebvre blew this idea up the geographical chimney back in the 60s, it's been developed in different directions by different academics, stressing specific rights that urban space seems to curtail. The gendered right to the city, the minority right to the city, and, you guessed it, the animal right to the city. But what rights do animals typically have that the city deprives them of? Well, if you'd allow me to furnish you with another feline example, in 2017 I was lucky enough to spend a year abroad in Seville, where of all things I encountered a dried up moat full of feral cats, and I wondered, what rights did those cats have? They couldn't play in the parks, they couldn't sleep in the metro stations, they couldn't fish in the river. These cats were deprived of a bunch of rights because of how the city had been designed, and because these particular strays had grown totally apart from any approximation of the natural world. In this respect, Lefebvre theorised that nature is resistant and infinite in its depth, but it has been defeated, that society has been completely urbanised. Perhaps the most glaring example of this is how we categorise non-human beings. We have houseplants and we have weeds. We have bees and we have creepy crawlies. And we have pets, but we also have pests. All these categories commodify nature in some way, either by making it a consumable good, like a purebred cat, or a problem to be solved through wage labour, like pest control. And the interesting thing is, Stray incorporates both of these categories. Stray looks like a friendly house cat, not a wild cat, but they treat the city like one, knocking obstacles out of the way, hiding within the slots, nooks and crannies of the city. Furthermore, in the slums and sewers of Stray, we encounter the Zerks, little creatures originally designed to eat rubbish that now eat everything, and are treated as a malaise on the city as a result. They're pests, and you're a pest too, at least at the outset. But your unique ability to traverse the city, which, as I've noted, is integral to exploration and world building in Stray, makes you more than just a pet, an amenable companion to these robots. You help them complete tasks and effect changes that they couldn't do alone, illustrating the possibility for animals to exist in the city in collaboration with others, as opposed to contrapose, as you pull these robots out of their repose. Throughout the game, then, Stray disrupts the pet-pest dichotomy of animals in the city by making the player character both and also neither. Now, this is all particularly relevant because Stray takes place in what appears to be a facsimile of Hong Kong, a real-life hotbed of the fight for the right to the city. But Stray's version is also a place where inequalities are drawn into contrast, and the spatial limitations of everyday life are made extremely clear. All the beings in this city, animal or not, live lives with limited rights, whether it's because of broken elevators to the surface, metal-chomping critters, or police-state sentinels. Returning to the literature for a moment, in Killer Cities, hotshot baldy geographer Nigel Thrift asks, can we create a network of solidarity with non-human beings in the name of a broader understanding of reality that both includes and overcomes the notion of species? This solidarity relies on the recognition that strays in society are not just animals. As Steele suggests, what is often not considered are the subtle connections between these non-human strays and many other human strays. Refugees, seasonal workers, illegal immigrants, the homeless, the otherwise unwanted, or the fringe dwellers of the urban realm. What if we're all strays in some respects? Half welcomes in a world that is first the product of capitalism, and second the product of its absurd convulsions with nature. I think Steele's point serves to illustrate that while the natural environment and human or urban environment are often placed in opposition to one another, creating an animal right to the city, i.e. creating a city more amenable to non-human beings, can also suggest a broader definition of urban rights, what Thrift calls an attenuated version of humanity. We can change the city into a space that enables the elements of otherness in our planet that we seem to spend so long ignoring, but are always there. The wildflowers in our crannies, the bees hiving in our slots, and the cats jumping from our nooks. As Oliver suggests, our concepts of man, humanity, and inhumanity are inherently bound up with the concepts of the animal, animality, and animals. Oliver's approach is to discount any dichotomy between the two and all the power relations it has to imply. I think in this respect, Stray is so much more than the first game where you play as a cat. It's the first game that acknowledges that animals can have agency, that animals can face discrimination, stratification, and hardship, just the same as humans. In the struggle against the obstructions of capitalist society, then, maybe the animal right to the city is a contradiction in terms. There is no us versus them. There is us, and us versus them. The climate crisis and all its compound challenges affect animals of all kinds just as they affect humans. And while we shouldn't lose focus on the dire human impacts, we should be ready to accept that the effect we are already having on animals is a terrifying barometer for what we are doing to ourselves. But why analyse a video game for this information? Well, because even sci-fi and fantasy worlds can shape our vision of the real one. Plot twist, John Bales doesn't just review games, he writes theory on them too, and this quote is pretty fire. Clearly, these video game cities are not realistic, but it's because of this we can ask why they are unrealistic in the particular way that they are, and receive interesting and potentially significant answers. So the beauty of Stray is simple. It's in its consciousness of a common challenge and the possibility of a response that recognises, as Joe Cox might have had it, that we are far meow united and have far meow in common than that which divides us.